Hi, everyone. I'm Nadine Gilkison. I'm one of the leads for the Indiana GEG, and we're excited for our next presenter, which is going to be Nate Ridgway, who co-authored a book with his mom and also Matt Miller, and is Don't Ditch That Tech, and he's amazing. So I am excited to have him do his session tonight to get us going.
Thank you so much, Nadine. I really appreciate it. So I am going to here provide a link for everybody to a Pear Deck session. Also, just for those people who are looking at this video afterward, there's going to be a link down here at the bottom of the slide deck that I'm going to share with you. You can also locate and go through this slide deck at your own pace at any time that you would like to. So this is both a live and also kind of a self-paced thing. So I'm going to go ahead and post the link to the Pear Deck in the chat. And also I'm going to share my screen so we can do both those things. So let's go ahead and share screen. It's been a while since I've done this in StreamYard. There we go. Perfect. So I will go ahead and I will post this link here as soon as this comes up. Looks like my Pear Deck is being a bit lethargic right now.
No worries. If you guys are joining us, please comment in the chat. Tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you teach.
Please do. We're gonna give the Pear Deck another load and see if I can get it to work. If not, we'll just go off the slides and life goes on.
That's tech.
Yes, that is tech. I've had a lot of issues in the last week with the Pear Deck add-on. It sounded like they were having some issues with it.
Okay.
And for some reason I've been having difficulty with getting it to boost, but hopefully we'll just give this a shot and see if it'll go this time.
Great.
Spinny, launching presentation. Okay, so anyways, I will briefly introduce myself for those people who don't know me. So my name is Nate Ridgway. I'm a teacher in Avon, Indiana. I teach at Avon High School. I'm a history teacher by trade. But yes, I had the chance. This was, back in 2019, before all of the craziness with COVID hit. There's the link right there. So you can go to joinpd.com. There's the link right there with those 6 letters. I will go ahead and I will paste the chat here. And Nadine, you'll probably have to send this out if you need to like publicly, post that. But I'll leave this here for a second while I introduce myself. I published that book right up there, Don't Ditch That Tech with Matt Miller and my mom. And once we did that, it was kind of off to the races in terms of kind of looking at how we use technology to differentiate for our students in both a physical and then when COVID hit, to looking at that also then in a remote setting as well. So now that that's posted, people should be able to connect there. If not, no worries. I will continue to keep posting, or Nadine will, I'm sure, continue to keep posting the link there as we go through. So Nadine, did you get that? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, I just typed in the joinpd.com and then
CVOSNO. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and hit go on this. If nobody's on it, that's okay. Life goes on. But again, you'll notice down here at the very bottom that if you would like to, again, have this slide deck afterwards for use in your own classroom, there's a bit.ly down there that you can grab that slide deck. It's bit.ly/GEG Blockbuster, and it is a case sensitive thing. Okay, so what our session tonight is going to be kind of going through is then kind of taking this idea of what do we do next? Kind of like what's our next step in the evolution of teaching, especially with thinking about with COVID and topics like UDL. So this is what we call breaking the Blockbuster model. It's a speech that I've done for other groups out there, which is kind of thinking about this idea of meditating on teaching after all of this insanity has hit for the last year. So reconsidering teaching in a Netflix world. Now, there's more on me here. All these links to all these things are live, by the way, of things that I talked about. So if you want to connect with me on Twitter or Gmail or our blog or Patreon, that's all available there. But with further ado, we're going to get to the good stuff. So on Pear Deck, since I do have a few people live here, or you can go ahead and just post in the comments on YouTube or wherever you are, that would also be totally fine. What is your favorite area, a genre, since we are talking about breaking a blockbuster model here? What is your favorite genre of movie type? And I'll let you respond either on Pear Deck or elsewhere where you'd like to. My personal favorite, I will say, is probably sci-fi. I love sci-fi. I was watching season 5 of The Expanse, and it was really, really good this last season. Let's see what some other people are saying. So we got drama and thriller. Yeah, 2 very good ones. Also some good ones out. Yeah, some good genres there.
And we also have some folks in the comments saying comedy.
Oh, comedy. Yeah, comedy's good too. Yeah. I'll be down for the occasional comedy, but for me, it's like it's hard right now in this 2020 to find things to to giggle about. But it's good. It's a nice relief, I guess. So with that, I want to kind of, before we go on, say that I'm not going to have all the answers for what we're going to talk about here. There's kind of this, I guess, this moniker out there that somebody talking to you about ed tech certainly has all the solutions, and we certainly don't. And especially with what life is going to look like with teaching on from now on this point, I think that's certainly the case. As we've all seen with 2020 and 2019 and 2021, curveballs can get thrown at you very, very quickly, and things can change rather suddenly. But what I'd like to kind of take this time to do tonight is to kind of think about where do we go next, or like what's some lessons that we can apply from this. And this is where I think we can take the idea of what happened to movie theaters and Blockbuster, which will be one metaphor we'll talk about, and even Netflix, and how we can kind of go on from there and think about what we can do with our teaching. So I want to show you this picture here. This is a picture of the first Nickelodeon in the United States. So I did some digging around thanks to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and some Pittsburgh libraries, and I found a picture of this thing. So what a Nickelodeon was, so me being the history teacher, is where you would pay a nickel to go in and see like an actual film, right? So that's why they were called Nickelodeons. And you can see there, based on like the whole movie theater vibe, that really it hasn't changed in the last 100 years, except, right now with COVID, nobody's going inside movie theaters. Other than that, it's pretty similar. And so like, I'd kind of like you to take this as like a model for teaching rather, and this kind of older form that maybe it's out of date and there's still a place for it, but there's certainly some issues with it that I think we should discuss. So I've got a kind of a comparison chart here for you. So what if we took this idea of a Nickelodeon / movie theater model of teaching, and we thought about what that looks like in a classroom? So the idea of like when you go to a movie theater, right? Like the owner has already decided what you, the teacher, what you're going to show or feature that day. Like you've already chosen, right? Movies, it's like, nope, you got to be here for the show at 7 o'clock. If you're not there on time, too late, we're not rewinding for you. Monolingual, probably very little chance of subtitles. Also, the movie's only at that theater. You have to go there. And if you can't get there, too bad. And I thought about this as a lot of like with our classroom and teaching, like, we are the ones who decide what to teach on, that, we only make, our lessons available at school with no change of schedule or pacing. Like if you're behind, too bad, we're not going back for you. And then also like, we're limiting our teaching styles to a certain, a certain kind of mono path in terms of, what we expose our students to or how they decide what's best for their learning. And on Pear Deck, okay, you can do this in the responses there, or you can post it on the comments wherever you'd like to. Which of those 3 traits on the right-hand side with the classroom do you feel like might best apply to your room? And you can just drag your icon there. I'll tell you mine that I feel like that I'm probably most guilty of is the teacher deciding what to teach or focus on. especially because like standards have such a heavy sway. And a lot of what we have to teach in a high school, I think that's something I'm especially guilty of, is like sticking too hard to the standards sometimes. But again, doing these things isn't necessarily bad. Again, it's just maybe they need a little bit of tweaking or updating here and there. So yeah, that I see one person agreed there with the teacher deciding what to teach or focus on. I've had people say all sorts of things. I think for me as well, because I'm predominantly English speaking, although I will dabble in the occasional German, that's something I'm guilty of as well, is teaching in a single language. My mom is a Spanish teacher. I should have taken advantage of it.
Sounds like it.
I should have. Life choices, right? So that being said, though, I think there still is a place for movie theater moments in the classroom. And there's a lot of evidence for this. So I could pull up study after study for you that says that, for example, like doing mini lessons for your students that are really short and concise is still very effective in terms of direct instruction for your kids. And so like, if I'm still going to do that in the classroom, what should I do that actually makes things better? So for example, I provide my students scaffolded notes. Now I provide 4 different forms for them to do. 2 of them are done on their own, so they can do them on paper, free form, or they can do them digitally free form. However, I do provide, at least for semester 1, also a fill in the blank option that is digital, and you can click that link right here in the presentation and get those, and also a blank outline form, and you can click those also and see what those are like here. And I do that for every single lesson that I teach.
I'm really glad that you said that, because I have 2 of my own kids have IEPs, and I had to actually talk to some of their teachers about making sure that they got some type of scaffolded notes. Just simply writing things down is not enough.
Yeah, and it takes a very small amount of time, right? And there's also so many different kinds of what we mean by scaffolded notes. I mean, you can scaffold based off of, like, providing students pictures for each slide, right? For their notes. You can do it based off of, something as I know, Nadine, you work a lot with students with dyslexia, and, providing scaffolding for that. There's all sorts of different levels you can do. For me, a lot of it is idea grouping and conceptual grouping. I do a lot of the scaffolding for students on that. Also, providing interactivity. So if you're going to do a movie theater type moment with your students where you're the driver of the bus, so to speak, make them as interactive as possible. Pear Deck, you can see me using that here. I have an example right here of a lesson where you can see where I'm doing some movie theater type teaching, and you can look at examples of how I do it. YouTube, story maps, all these different things, vocabulary that you can use to make your material as engaging and as interactive as possible. Closed caption is really, really important. Because YouTube does provide a closed caption option for you, I have not turned that on here. But for example, like if I'm doing a presentation in slides with my students, I have them vote at the very beginning of the year. Would you prefer to have the closed captions on, especially like with masks? Like sometimes, because some teachers struggle to enunciate through the mask, it's pretty valuable. Other times, not so much. And then also having time for students to process what the heck they've learned. The worst thing about a 2.5 hour movie is that you've sat there and you don't remember what happened 15 minutes ago. And you're like, why is that person doing what they're doing? Because you get lost in like some super convoluted Marvel deep level of plot thickness that you just can't keep up with. Give your students time to process, draw predictions, or draw connections, make predictions, these kind of things, right? That are very powerful for having them actually have a chance to make a connection to their learning. So then, we come to the next step. And these were the days, man.
Hey now.
Hey, I grew up in this too.
I'm older than you though.
I know, but I'm turning 30 in 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, and I'm just not having it.
I'm almost 50.
Oh, I wouldn't put you that old.
We would just clamor about, every Friday night going to Blockbuster.
Oh yeah, man. Rent 6 videos, get the 7th free. These are the days.
That's right.
Now, for its time, okay, Blockbuster was revolutionary. And a lot of this has to go back to some stuff with Blockbuster about how they did about getting copies of the original CDs and being able to sell them for much cheaper than movie theaters were, which for its time, hugely influential. But why was this such a big break? Well, let's take a look over here on the left-hand side. You could watch the movies, Be Kind, Rewind, right? An unlimited amount of times before, you had to return them in a certain day span, right? So if like you really enjoyed something, you can go back and rewatch it again. You don't have to sit there for 15 minutes while you rewind. You could also like change the pace that you rewatch stuff, right? So like you could rewind. If you didn't want to watch a scene, you can fast forward. You could pause it, right? All these different things are now all possible. And also the way that people can consume media is completely different too, because as long as you have a TV and a DVD player / VCR, you've got this whole new medium that's accessible to you, right? Also, you can go in a store and you can make choices based off what you liked, which was huge. The idea that like, I'm not going to go to okay, if I go to a movie complex and it has more than one movie, there might be 8 different movies there, and that's like it. Blockbuster, there's literally like hundreds, right? Which is gigantic. Now, the dreaded late fees. You still turn stuff in late, it's late. And you have to pay for that. So we'll talk about that later. And then again, generally the video is still available in an only language, which kind of sucks. So how do we then apply this to the classroom? What might it look like? Well, we might start to talk about organizing content into units, which involves some spiraling. We go back and we hit some stuff that needs to. We can change the pace of learning for students if need be. All of a sudden now, we can make content interactive, that it just doesn't have to be consumed inside the classroom. The worst form of this probably being just straight up busy work at home. The better versions of this are probably stuff that's actually applicable to home life that can be a little bit more personalized. And now, again, students having choice about the content or the process, but it's limited to maybe what I have on hand in my store, right? And then also still giving penalties for late work or you just don't accept it after a certain date. This, I will tell you, is a personal struggle of mine that I've really had to rethink with COVID. And for me, how I thought about it is like this. If I give penalties for late work, of course, I want my students to turn in stuff on time, right? And I guess the reward for that is that I grade their stuff faster. If students decide to turn in stuff late and I penalize for that, if you remember Blockbuster, you rack up a bunch of late fees. If you have $50 worth of late fees and Blockbuster credits racked up, why the heck would you ever go back to that Blockbuster and run another video? And I think about that in my own teaching too. Like if I have students who they're like, oh, it doesn't matter if it's already late, I'm not going to turn it in. I'm already going to get a crappy grade on it. It doesn't matter. I'm basically disincentivizing students completing the work, and I'm getting rid of the idea of mastery. Even though, of course, there's still something to be said for holding students accountable. There's ways to do that are outside of grades.
That's a great analogy to use.
Yeah. And then again, content only being available in one language, but we can certainly talk about some modifications for this, like subtitles and things like that. So how can we get the most out of Blockbuster moments? Stuff like offline access, enabling Google Drive, for example, if you're a Google-enabled school, or OneDrive, if you're a Microsoft school, showing your students how to do that's really, really important. Giving students choice, content, process, product, all the good things that Caroline Tomlinson, for example, would talk about. And then translating your materials. Now, this is something that I would love for Google to update in the future, but I do it manually right now. It takes a little bit of time. I'll just give this quick anecdote. Basically, I had a student-teacher conference, or student-parent conference, rather, teacher-parent conference once. And I had a teacher, one of my students and their parent was Spanish-speaking, had been, been in my classroom for almost a semester at this point. They'd come in, and I had a translator in the room with me talking about how how they thought it was going for the child, and et cetera, et cetera. And they said, because you can see this example there over on the right-hand side, because I translated all my lessons into Spanish, so the exact same slides, it was Google Translate. So by no means not good Spanish, but again, the attempt was made, right? Think of it like bad dubbing in a movie video, right? It's that's not what the person's mouth is saying, but you can see they're trying.
You can get the gist.
Yeah, you can get the gist. They said that this was the first time that they had actually been able to participate in their child's education in a classroom because of just simply taking the time. It took maybe about 20 minutes for each lesson. And I just translated that and had a translated copy of the notes. And it was a really, really powerful moment. So it takes time, but it absolutely is worth it.
And I saw, with you using Pear Deck, that Pear Deck has
immersive reader.
Yeah, immersive reader, and also the language capability too.
Yeah. And then came the Blockbuster Killer. Yeah. So Netflix, oh boy. Remember when they used to have like the packages and the envelopes are all decorated on them too? I still remember getting Netflix envelopes.
Oh yeah, you knew. You had the red envelope.
Oh yeah. So basically my last evolution here, well, it's not the last one by any means, but the next step is kind of, this is the underlying motto. There's no such thing as too much access. Netflix took the idea of you being able to access content. And as you can very clearly see from Netflix today, they basically are uploading new stuff all the time. If you've ever met somebody who said they finished Netflix, that person deserves like a medal. It's just, there's so much stuff. But let's talk about if we applied Netflix as a metaphor, or take your pick, Amazon Prime, YouTube, Hulu, etc., for the streaming world for the classroom. You can watch videos anywhere, multitudes of time, any kind of device, anywhere you want to. I mean, you can even hard download videos, right? So that way you have have without internet access. You can rewind, pause, fast forward. You can even watch them at an increased speed to watch things faster, which was very controversial when it came out on Netflix. I mean, you had like movie industry critics saying like, this is going to ruin our content. But then some people were like, well, actually, people process content differently. So maybe you should allow them to watch it at, 1.25 speed.
Right.
All right. And you get all these debates that we've had about in teaching as well. Costs of streaming. So your expectations for your classroom, AKA simple, clear, upfront, nothing hidden, right? And this is also something that I love about Netflix as well. Is that like if you watch something, they're like, oh, by the way, we noticed that you love this. You should probably check out these other things. They're really interesting and you'd like that if you like this as well, right? And this is something like I thought about this as like application in my classroom, like, oh, guys, if you're interested in this, go check out this stuff. This would be really, really cool. You'd love to learn more about this, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can see over here in terms of how we apply this to our classroom, all of a sudden we've opened up way more student-driven instruction. We've thought about, how we're actually consuming content in the classroom. We're talking about the pace of learning being adjusted for individual students. We're also talking about the ways that we teach becoming much more transparent in terms of our thinking, whether that's procedures or the content that we choose to talk about or how we assess student learning, right? All of these things are suddenly become way less hidden. Because like, for example, like with a Blockbuster model, like we'd always say like, oh, you should read what my policy is on late work back on the rubric, right? Now with Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever you do, you understand from the get-go, this is costing you $10 a month. This is what the cost is. We'll charge you every month. Here you go. And other than, some Disney Plus stuff where they charge you, to watch the newest movie that's come out, right? Or whatever, some of those premium content.
Yeah, but they've been getting creative with that.
They have been.
All these different models. And, we're a family of 6 and my kids were like, oh, but it costs this much to watch the movie. And we were like, if we went to the movie theater, it'd be like that times 6. So. Right,
exactly. Yeah. So if you had to pick one of these 4 dots over here on the right, which one do you think like you're doing in your classroom right now? You can do this on Pear Deck, or you can post a comment on YouTube or wherever you would like to.
That one was a hard one for me to choose because I love several of those.
I like this one a lot. I'm very upfront with my students.
Yes.
Yeah. Because they're also like, what's going to be on the quiz? I'm like, did you check our objectives from each day? Like, you pretty much can take those and turn them into, whatever we're going to assess, right? So
teacher that's used in Canvas, Mastery Pass. So using that path of that the kid can kind of go at their own pace.
I know. I got off of Canvas right when that was starting to become really popular, and I miss it now. So, yeah. So some other kind of metaphors here. Again, things that I would encourage you to kind of think about applying to your classroom if you haven't. Obviously, vast amount of content available. We mentioned that. Late work, but with empathy. You know, the idea of, okay, like I expected you to get this turned in, but I'm going to hold you accountable, you know, to in other ways. And especially I think right now, like the idea of grace in the middle of COVID is really, really important. You know, whether you have family members that are sick or, you know, kids have underlying trauma that's going on that's maybe predates COVID, all these things are really, really important, right?
Right.
One other thing that I think is really cool that kind of also speaks to differentiation in Amazon Prime, specifically Prime more than the other ones, is this X-ray feature. If you haven't seen this on Prime, it's really cool. Like when you're watching a movie, and if you're doing it on a mobile, it's a little bit different. You have to like go over and like stop the movie and actually click on it. It'll say like, oh, like, did you know this actor was also in this film and did these things? And did you like also notice this subtle detail or goof that they made? Right. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Because like if you have something, you know, that's there for students, like an extra, hey, by the way, if this interests you, go and explore this. That's also a really kind of powerful opportunity for students to think about like, oh, like just because I've learned about something, that doesn't mean I have to stop here. I can go and explore more about this, you know, idea.
I need to go check that out. I didn't know it.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had that feature.
It's really interesting. It's been on there now, I think, for a couple years, but like you have to, I think it's always up in like a top corner that you have to, yeah. And then let's see. Yeah, movies obviously available in a wide variety of languages, closed captions, you know, everything that you could ever want there. Because I'm running low on time, I'm going to skip a little bit ahead and talk about some strategies for how you can actually do this in your classroom. So the first one, open up your whole library. Yes, I have actually done this. What I do on, and I did this on Canvas when I was on Canvas. I now am, my school uses Schoology, so I do it on there. Students can access every lesson, every quiz, every activity, every notes page 24/7. And they can look at it at any time, including YouTube videos from me that they can go watch about all these things at any time. The second point here about having students create content, this starts to kind of get to what I think is like the next step after a Netflix world, which is more like the TikTok world, which is where students are actually now creating the content that is going to be consumed in the classroom. And for me, this is kind of like the next DLC that I really want to go explore and push this metaphor to. It gets to kind of the whole idea of student-centered differentiation. Then for tutorials, okay, this is a big thing for me. There's an app out there called IORAD. It's used on Google Chrome, but it's also a desktop app. If you've not tried this thing, it is really, really cool. What it does is it creates interactive tutorials for students or parents and guardians to do anything that is on a computer. And if you're like, how is that different than a screencast? Well, because they're not watching it, they're actually doing it. So for example, like if I have a student who's like, my mom doesn't know how to make a parent Canvas account, I'll be like, hey, I'm going to send you an IORAD. And then it has the parent literally click through and do the exact things that they would have to do to actually make that particular account. It's extremely, extremely powerful. I used to set them up for individual lessons as well when COVID first hit. And like when my students were kind of still figuring out like how to find everything in the lesson, I would say, click on this first, then go to this, et cetera, et cetera. It's really, really helpful. And then other supports. Seesaw, Remind 101, Talking Points is another one, Flipgrid. All these things are incredibly powerful integrative tools that you can add in that can help you get the most out of a very differentiated Netflix-like classroom. So with the remaining wonderful 2 minutes that we have left here, what are some ideas that people or questions they might have about making learning more accessible? You can write your ideas out on Pear Deck, or you can type them in the comments. You can also tweet them to me, which I'll pull up my Twitter here in a second for people. And then again, here is the perma link to the slide presentation.
You had a Facebook user that asked, do you use the free version of IORAD?
I do. So IORAD uses the basically it's kind of like a a freemium model, if you will. So they allow you to create unlimited amounts of free ones, but if you decide, and then I think they give you like 2 premium off the bat. And then if you decide to pay for the premium, it's super expensive. I mean, it's got some like really good supports in there. Like you get to add personalized voiceovers and stuff like that, and like differentiated option. For most of my needs, I've never had a need to go down that route. But I'd say at that point, if you are needing that depth of support, it's probably better to contact your school for like financial help with that, because it's crazy expensive.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
But it's definitely good. The free version's definitely good.
Yeah, the free version's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Teacher's favorite price, as Matt likes to say.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your time with us tonight.
No, thanks so much for having me.
I know I've gotten so many ideas just listening to that conversation, and it kind of re-energizes some of the thoughts that I have about our own school district, working with our teachers on modules and organization, and talking about how do you basically take your content and make it like an interactive textbook.
Yeah.
And that they can access at any time. So hearing these things tonight really helped.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, everyone, I wanted to let you know that if you watch this later, it's always going to be available on our YouTube channel. So I just wanted to let everyone know, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.